Brand disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed by individuals on this platform, the callers plus invited guests, are their own. The information you hear does not reflect the overall views of all parties associated with this brand. We encourage everyone to research all things heard live or via archive for edification purposes. Discretion is advised.
Don't touch that dial. You're now listening to Debate Talk Free Radio.
Yes, Styles' mic is having a little bit of technical difficulties, so if you're not hearing him, clearly it's because of that. My name is Emunah. I am your hostess for this evening, so I want to thank you for joining us. We're going to have one of those serious discussions, and every now and then we have these serious discussions. Well, we have a lot of serious discussions, some more serious than others. This is one that I take very seriously. This is October the 1st, and it is Domestic Abuse Awareness Month. Last year, I believe we did a show on domestic abuse when it was Domestic Abuse Awareness, but we focused on intimate partner abuse. And sometimes people tend to think that domestic abuse, it's the dude fighting or the woman fighting, but under the umbrella of domestic abuse is the child. And so we definitely do not want to leave out the child and childhood abuse, because a lot of the issues that then follow the individual or individuals into adulthood was cultivated in childhood. And today we're going to talk about, I'm going to read a little bit of statistics and then read a little bit of stats, which are like, for me, they're like, wow. And then we're going to get into domestic abuse, the signs, the symptoms, and solutions, and hopefully give a voice to the voiceless, speak for children who don't necessarily have the platform to speak for themselves, give parents awareness of what they may be doing that they may not recognize as abuse and actually is. But before we get into all of that, we're going to welcome those who have joined us today. I believe we have Sister Mayanah on the line and Sister Tipharah on the line, and then Brother MariEL is going to join us. So, Sister Tipharah, how are you this evening?
Hey, shalom, sis. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for joining us for this very important conversation. What are your thoughts, just opening up before we check on Sister Mayanah, about the need to speak about such things as childhood abuse?
I think it is just as prevalent as everything else that has been brought up so far. You know, one thing about your shows is that you tend to speak on the things that everybody kind of just sweeps under the rug, and so, or they're taboo issues in the community, whether it's just the black community, the Israelite community, the Christian community. I think it's something that's just widespread across the board, but more specifically with our own people, like, why is it swept under the rug? And is it swept under the rug on purpose, or is it swept under the rug just being unaware? And so I think it's very important. And I'm glad that you're talking about it, just to bring more awareness and maybe open up a platform where people are comfortable enough to, after the show or during the show, call in and possibly ask questions, get clarity, or where have you, and maybe feel and urge people who know about child abuse that are turning a blind eye to it to, report it in just out of respect and love for the child.
Correct. Hopefully this will compel us to, like you said, be aware, because that's what it is. It's awareness. And so we have to bring these things to the forefront. And this is what we are able to do here on the Relationship Challenge, as well as Under the Palm, is bring things that people don't usually speak about. Not to like just shine a nasty light on it. We always have a solution, hopefully oriented discussion, or one that's towards clarity. And so, this is right in line with what it is that we do. So thank you for joining us. Sister Mayanah, how are you this evening? Welcome, Sister Mayanah, panelist, day one, riding on the Debate Talk for You platform. What's going on?
Hi, shalom. Thank you for inviting me once again to the under TRC platform. I would like to echo what our Sister Tipharah said regarding TRC and the fact that in many spaces that conversations are taboo, or where there's this idea that the women are speaking and the masculine principle isn't present, that TRC does allow for that kind of communication to happen. I think TRC might have been the very first to really invite both the masculine and feminine principle to sit at the table and parse through these important things. And so today, when we're talking about domestic violence in the home, because when we talk about the domicile, we're talking about the home. And to echo what you said earlier and kind of build on the thought that very often we look at the couple, we look at the man, we look at the woman, and we forget that the man and the woman became one so that there would be righteous seed. And then so the thought now is, okay, so when the men are arguing, the women are arguing, what's going on with the child? And we do neglect the children or their well-being in many, many cases. One of the TRC shows that we had, I believe, was What About the Children? And this show has always been very cognizant that there are many moving parts when we have a conversation about family, and there's a lot more involved when we talk about relationships than the kind of surface definition that we often go to mentally when we think about relationships. And now, even when we think about domestic violence, all of the different things that involves, and necessarily that's the children. And we'll be looking at, I'm pretty sure that as the conversation develops, we'll be looking at how often going back to the child and the well-being of the child and the fatherless and the like is emphasized in Torah, emphasized in the Tanakh, and throughout the text. And so this idea that we have become so self-absorbed as the adults is so incredibly anti-biblical. And just to kind of become aware, be aware of that and the reason for this type of investment. So with that, I yield so that we can forward the conversation.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Those voices, Sister Mayanah. Brother MariEL, he said he'll be here a little bit later. If you're listening to the audience, you can notice that you heard the sisters chime in and be like, "We are the brothers." Brothers, you know you're always welcome. Feel free to press 1 if you would like to join this discussion because it's important. It is very, very important. I'm going to read a few statistics, and then we're going to talk about it. I wanted to first say that child abuse, and I believe Sister Tipharah just said it, it goes across the board. It's not any one, quote, nationality or color or religion that we see. We saw recently how many cases came out and accusations came out for child abuse in the Catholic Church, right? We see it in different countries. We see with different religions. So understanding it's not any one particular people who are susceptible to abusing children. It's unfortunate, but this is the reality. So this is some statistics coming from childhelp.org for child abuse. It says that every year more than 3.6 million referrals are made to child protective agencies involving more than 6.6 million children. That's a lot of souls. It says the United States has one of the worst records among industrial nations, losing an average between 4 to 7 children every day to child abuse and neglect. So the leading nation, industrialized nation, has one of the worst records of children essentially falling through the cracks. People not aware of what's going on with children in and around them, not able to reach them in time, not able to give or help the parents be supported so that they can realize what it is they're doing. This is a huge issue, but I'll continue. It says, let me go down here. It said, 6.6 million children are with referrals. In 2014, the agencies found an estimated 702,000 victims of child maltreatment, but that only tells part of the story. So that was, 4 years ago. The number is almost at 1 million of just maltreatment, because you have abuse, and then you have neglect, and you have all of these things. You have child molestation. You know, there are different ways in which you see the issue or the abuse manifested in the child. You may not see the child who's sexually abused react in the same way the child who's being emotionally neglected, And so because we're so busy in this day and time where we're going to and fro, and the parents or the caretaker may just be concerned with feeding the child, clothing the child, they may have passed on behaviors or rearing the child in the way in which they were reared. And because they didn't think anything was wrong with it, or because no one stepped in for them, they don't think it's abuse. You see what I'm saying? And so we have to look at culture when we're talking about abuse. We have to look at things that are norms. Sometimes I see these funny but not so funny memes on social media where somebody may have a belt, a cord, a whip, like all of these things, and then the caption is all the things I got beat with in childhood. You know what I'm saying? And we're like, everybody's laughing. You have this community consensus, like that's accurate because this is the way in which that people were chastised and children were chastised in many spaces. But I contend that necessarily wasn't, beating a child with an extension cord. You know what I mean? But it was normalized. Even you have comedians making jokes about these things. And so we have to look at these things. Are these culturally accepted? Have we accepted abuse and normalized it? All of these things play into it. I'm going to stop right here. I'm going to go a little bit into the mental disorders that can develop later, but I'm going to stop right there and hear some of the thoughts of the panel of what you've heard so far. So, Sister Tipharah, what are your thoughts on what you've heard so
far? The numbers were incredible, and it's just it's interesting that the numbers, unfortunately, are not going to stop. They're going to continue growing. Before the show, I was thinking, what do I speak about that will bring an impact? Is it something that you want to talk about? And the reason it kind of hit so close to home for me is because as a child I was abused physically, sexually, emotionally. And so as you grow up, as you said, some of those things that you are not aware of, even within yourself, you may not know if you are letting those things linger out to your own home or others around you. And so I've had a support system around me so much to the point because I think it makes you do one or two things. I think it makes you either continue the cycle or it does the complete opposite. It makes you become so overbearing and so protective that you try to shield your children from the world. And I think for me that's kind of what I did. And that's unhealthy as well. It's another form of abuse because that's not real life. And so once you identify where the problem is, and then you first have to be able to identify the problem. It goes back to you said identifying it. Then you can correct something. But just like with most things, if you don't identify anything, then people won't correct anything and they won't even address it. So those things that I've experienced and those things that the community have experienced, I feel like, again, this is another opportunity to share something in hopes that it'll give someone else the courage to say, now is my chance that I can speak. And so I'm just so honored and thankful that you have me on your panel, but also thank you for, again, being bold enough to talk about this topic in the community.
Thank you so much for sharing. My heart goes out to you as well as those who experience childhood abuse. It's prevalent. As you said, it has been and continues to be an issue, and you never know who's suffering. You know what I mean? And so the courage that you had to say, listen, to speak your truth, Most High bless, is much appreciated because it makes the conversation be able to open up. It makes us have an opportunity, like you said, to hopefully embolden someone else to come forward and say, listen, this is my experience. How do I heal from it? And I would agree with you that we tend to either overcompensate or so that we can shield our children from what it is that we've seen, because child abuse also can be happening directly to you, or you can experience by seeing it happen to someone else. You know what I'm saying? And so that's a level of emotional and mental abuse. Some children witness things that they shouldn't witness, and then the thought is, you should shut your mouth. You shouldn't say anything, and so it closes them down from this level of expression, and sometimes they feel responsible for something that happened to someone else, and that follows them. So my point is, it can take formed so many different ways. And the willingness for us to examine ourselves and our surroundings is the first step to actual healing. So we're going to come to Sister Mayanah and hear her thoughts on what she's heard so far, the statistics. I don't know why I keep saying statistics. The statistics and what you've heard. I'm like, statistics? What in the world is that? What you've heard Sister Tipharah say thus far.
I would agree that the statistics are alarming and heartbreaking and disappointing, but not altogether unexpected. Anyone that has just in living knows that they have someone in close proximity, if not they themselves, experience some sort of violation in their childhood. Unfortunately, just recently on social media, I think a man rather innocently or just out of curiosity posed a question on his social media asking the ladies when did they know that they were being looked at sexually. And he was alarmed and astonished that so many women reported that they were prepubescent when they were being looked at and they were being touched in this way sexually as children. And so just as a man, he's completely just, I could not believe, he expected some things but didn't expect those things. And as one woman said, confessed that this was her experience, more women came out. And I think this really kind of speaks to that there is, we talked earlier about discipline. We have discipline traditions that involve corporal punishments. We talk about the spankings, the whippings, the use of extension cords. I know that my father being from the South, the switch was something that every other Southern person that I know about, and even some people in the Caribbean, you say switch to these people, they're like, okay, I know what that is. And we have different stories of how the switch came to come into contact with our bare skin. And I know, like my father, for example, this part of the psychology was, and I was talking to another, I think it might have been a brother, the idea the parent would make you go and choose the instrument that would punish you. So you would go out into your backyard or wherever, and you would have to choose the switch. And you were, immediately told it can't be too small because they'll make you go back and get another one. So there's this part of that in the psychology of the discipline, or these discipline traditions. And there's all these kind of studies as to why this is like the discipline tradition of choice in our particular communities, stemming from all kinds of maybe remnants of being whipped in slavery or the like. But to what degree that's the origin, I wouldn't personally be able to contest. I wouldn't be attest to. But in terms of these discipline traditions, there are those that contain violence in our particular community, and that's a fact. I think that another thing that contributes to childhood abuse is being in an environment that is unstable. Children need stability, and when they find that the adults around them are always on the brink of separation, or have been separated, or are threatening separation, attachment in your young age is extremely important. If you don't have proper attachments, then you become antisocial as you grow up, and those antisocial behaviors start to present themselves in any number of ways, in any number of spaces as you become older, and you don't know how to create proper attachments with other people when you get older. And I think part of that was discussed by Tipharah when she says that some parents are not capable to really navigate that space because there's something that was deficient in their upbringing. So that carries over into this new parental role that they're not equipped to handle. And so maybe not intentionally, but by way of consequence, the child suffers once again because there was never, that wasn't remedied anywhere that it needed to be remedied before the child got to this space. And I want us to really kind of interrogate the different, I'm glad that you're doing this, the many different ways that abuse can take place inside the home, and who are all of the people, all of the all of the individuals inside the home that this is affecting, and the child is such an important component of family, because this is what we come together to do, is to create the child. And then if we create the child and then we don't feed the child in these proper ways, you spoke earlier about, okay, so the child has clothes, check. The child ate dinner, check. And you just kind of go through this bare minimum checklist, and you don't realize that we're talking about a whole human being. And because this is, like you said earlier, an entire soul that we're accountable for. So you don't just lose, the extra. The child is not the appendage. The child is not the extra in the relationship. And maybe we should talk about that also, how the child gets into the relationship, the fact that some people really do consider the child the consequence of the relationship, or the consequence of maybe like sex. We talked about that earlier, when the child becomes the consequence of sex and not the objective. And so there's a difference between being the reason why something happened and being kind of the side effect of something happening. So I think it'll be important and interesting to kind of explore those spaces as well.
All right, thank you for that. That was the voice of Sister Mayanah. This conversation for me, you're talking in like bells and whistles, and I have to pull myself back like, okay, hold on a minute, because we can't start all the way from the top. But I want to say thank you for those who have just joined us. We are having a very important conversation. Today's October the 1st. The whole month will be Domestic Abuse Awareness Month. It's not just 1 month, but the reality is in this month people are paying attention, and so you take advantage of the ways that is here and say, listen, hey, pay attention. This is real. This is serious. And as Sister Mayanah stated, one of the issues, and we spoke of this before, the sex equal marriage, all of these things, because the concern is, or that some people think that the child, it's me and the dude, and the child just popped up. You know what I mean? Like, so since you're here, I guess I'll take care of you or whatever, right? And so when we look at children as a burden, like my mother would always say, says, your child could either be your burden or your blessing, and I choose that. My children are my blessing. And when people look at their child as a burden, because for whatever reason, I can't even say why, because it could be a plethora of reasons, then you're going to treat the child as a burden. You see what I'm saying? And usually that's going to come with some level of abuse. And the thing is that the abuse can go on one side where it's neglect, and it can go on the other side where it, as Tipharah spoke about, where it becomes this overbearing, enabling and cutting the child off from the natural growth and progression. So ultimately you stunt the child's growth on one side and you stunt the child's growth on the other side. So it's a very slippery slope. Parenthood is not a perfect thing. You learn as you grow, but there are some things that we adopted from places that we're coming from that have not been beneficial and still are not. Like when I'm reading, and I haven't read in a long time, y'all, because I've been busy, but my narratives, as y'all know, I got to go into slave narratives. But one of the thoughts was, and this is what you hear oftentimes repeated in our culture, children are seen and not heard. And so the children of the time were expected to experience all of the abuses and internalize them and say nothing to them, because you couldn't come and really tell your parents, what are they going to do? You see what I'm saying? They're disempowered in their own spaces. And so that mentality goes down the line, and you will see sexual abuse from generation to generation, and the grandmother would tell the mother, it's okay, honey, you ain't going to die. It happened to me. It happened to such and such and Junie and Judy, and we're here. Come on, we could do this, right? And so there's this lack of empathy for one another, because we begin to, and I spoke about this in other places, as parents may begin to compare whatever they've been through with what the child is currently going through. So one of the ways which you diminish your child or you lessen their value is by continuing to compare your experience to their present experience. So emotionally, you shut them down. Oh, that's nothing. You think that's something. I walked 6 miles in the snow to get to school, and you over here. You see what I'm saying? And we tend to do that. Parents tend to do that to tell the child to buck up. But your emotional intelligence may not be the child's emotional intelligence. What you need may not be what the child needs. And so when you close them off from not hearing them and let them know that only food, clothes, and shelter is what is important for you, emotionally that child begins to grow at a deficit. And they begin to either they become extroverts or introverts. They lash out, they become violent or ill-tempered. It really depends on the temperament of the child. They might fall into depression or they might become promiscuous so that they'll seek the attention outside. And so because I'm leaning to that way, I wanted to read some more before we go back to Tipharah, some of the mental health disorders and addictions that are related to early childhood abuse. Risk for intimate partner violence, like if you've seen physical violence in your home, you might be more willing to accept physical violence in your relationships and translate that as, girl, what movie was that, Baby Boy? When he's all abusive and he's like, girl, it's because I love you. And you'll be misconstruing that violence as some type of protection, right, and some type of love, which is dysfunctional. Alcohol abuse, illicit drug abuse, so something to numb. That's what we usually do. We want to numb the pain. We don't want to deal with whatever we have experienced as children. And what happens is oftentimes if we don't deal with what happened with us as children, it becomes crystallized. You know what I'm saying? It forms like hard, like a rock formation. And so a lot of us can't even reach that child unless we consciously try to reach the child, because we've learned so long to deal with it in the ways in which we deal with it, so that hurt in that child is covered on for all the ways, all of the layers of our maladaption, if you can understand what I'm saying. So we have the hurt, injured child, and we have the grown person still operating at the intelligence emotionally of that hurt, injured child. And so we say, I'm loud because da-da-da-da-da. I'm feisty because da-da-da-da. It's our defense mechanism. Or I don't mess with people because da-da-da-da. And really that child is saying, I don't trust you. I'm not heard. So I have to make sure I'm demanding your attention from me. Smoking and drinking at an early age, depression, and attempts at taking their own lives. We see a lot of young youths who are being bullied and accepting being bullied in the home as well as in schools, lean towards real problematic type behavior. As it relates to sexual, I'm going to stop right there because I said a lot. So I'm going to stop right there before I go on and check on Sister Tipharah and Sister Mayanah, and then I'm going to check on Sal to see if anybody is on the phone line and if MariEL is with us as yet. So, the mic.
That was a lot of information, sis. And, as you were talking, I was just sitting here thinking just about our last conversation on your last show. It kind of goes back into the whole question that I asked, some of the elders and some of the leaders of how do you vet people in the community, because when you get to a point where people are looking for an extension of family or a safe haven as they are being approached as single women, what are some of the things to look for? Because there is an often time that people or children who are abused, such as myself, they do one or two things. They either become very, very sheltered, very quiet, introverted, or they become the opposite. They be completely boisterous or completely whatever. And so whether it's publicly or personally or whatever. And so for those that, and I can only speak for me, I became an introvert in my personal life, but very outspoken in my public life, which is very almost oxymoron, so to speak. But I had a hard time allowing people to even get close to me or trusting people because I became very defensive. Again, that overprotective barrier that I had around my children, I also had around myself as a defense mechanism. And so one of the side effects to that, just on the level of adulthood, is it prevents and it does bring barriers in communicating and connecting with people, whether they're interested in you or even building in relationships with people, because you have a very you just kind of have a side eye for everyone. Gives you a very broadened sense and almost a very keen eye to see child abuse and neglect in children when you see it. And so that also plays a part in things that you're willing to accept or not. Just like what a child that may have that would have saw a physical abuse between their parents at home or in the home or whatever, then they grow up thinking that that's normal. Well, for a person who has been through abuse and neglect, when I see it, that captures more of my attention and my time, and I try to find a way to protect the child, and I figure out a way to build relationships to do that, and that becomes the meaning of my relationship building, whether it's a spoken or unspoken thing. And I've noticed that I've been willing to go outside of myself to do so for the sake of even protecting of the children. There's been a point in my professional life that I worked for the University of Florida in their child abuse prevention program, working with the Department of Children and Family when child abuse was called on them and their children were either taken or about to be taken if they did not take parenting courses. And some of that training is actually the reason that my personal business got started, for Cornerstones. And so in my personal life, that's kind of how that got started. I didn't realize there were so many of us. And when I say us, I'm going to relate with myself first. There's so many people that I can identify that hurt. I can identify barriers. I can identify pain when I see it. And so I know what it's like to want to say something but afraid to say something because you're not going to be heard. And so when I said on your show last week, I don't know how I became a leader, because when I got quiet, I had so many women reaching out saying, thank you for sharing, or thank you for doing something, or thank you for being my voice because I couldn't talk, or thank you for giving me the opportunity. And that's the only thing I can think of is if my transparency is going to help bring some healing to somebody else, I'm willing to do that. And so, again, if we see it and it sticks out to us like a red flag, some things you don't cover up. Some things you try to get a handle on, and some things prick your heart more than others. And for me, child abuse and child neglect is one of those things, and it is it's disheartening. And I must say, unfortunately, I would have to tell you that even with the leaders in the community, prominent leaders that people look up to, there's child neglect in their homes.
Wow.
And I feel bad. Because I wasn't woman enough to say something at that time directly when I felt like I should have reported it. And now I wonder every day if that child is okay. This is in our community, and this is very recent as of this year.
Wow. You know, based on the statistics, it's a human condition, and it's more magnified when it's those who may take the position or the lead and has not yet ordered their household right. And so when you do take a position as a lead, whomever you may be, male or female, the expectation is you got yourself together. This is why people oftentimes get really disappointed with leaders. Like, okay, we're following you with the assumption that you got yourself together. You know what I mean? And so when we find out that there's different aspects of a so-called leader's life that is not together, especially in the area of marital affairs as well as children, it's like the pastor's children syndrome. You know, at that point, the people are like, well, how can I follow you? How can I listen to what you're saying? They usually look at your offspring to determine the validity of whatever you're trying to bring to the people. And so I would say that as we're talking about signs right now and symptoms, as Tipharah is saying, it's important to begin to look at the symptoms that we are seeing. Don't just discount it as the child is whiny, the child is disgruntled. That may be the case, but in their child language, that may be the only way they know how to communicate. I would say, approach the parents, approach the individuals, approach the family. If there's other people within the family that can form an intervention for, hey, what's going on with such and such? Because some people don't know how to take stress. Some parents have issues from wherever they're coming from, and so they may not see anything wrong with what it is they're doing. They may have already normalized that behavior, and the people around are supposed to be loving and caring enough to say, hey, is everything all right here? Like, I'm that person. You know what I'm saying? I'm the tap you on your shoulder type person. I get a bad rap for it, but I can't help myself because I'm that person. Like, yo, what's going on over here? You know what I mean? And people might be like, mind your business, da-da-da-da-da. But at least I, will say, hey, okay, is there somebody else I could talk to? Maybe they might listen to you. Maybe it needs to be a family intervention. Ask the child, because once the child goes over, once the report for the agencies come into play, that's a whole different ballgame. And I would say as a community, as people who care about one another, one of the first things we do is to diligently inquire what is going on. Are you in need of an assistance? This time, when we see like a generation ago, 2 generations ago, and I'm going to come to you, Sister Mayanah, when the parents couldn't get themselves together, often who would they send the child to? The granny. They would send the child to the granny or the grandfather or the home that can provide more stability for that child. That was the internal net that was supposed to help the child when the parents couldn't get themselves together or they couldn't stand on their feet. And so you even have an epidemic where there's more grandparents raising their children than some of the parents saw. So the parents went really far with it. But the point of the matter is there a safety net within that family or any family that is experiencing whether the inability to properly give the child what they need? Who can help to compensate? Who can help to aid the situation? So hopefully I didn't confuse it. I'm going to go to Sister Mayanah. But excellent points. I'm going to go to Sister Mayanah at this point to hear her thoughts on what has been said thus far.
First, to revisit the point of sometimes we see things and we normalize it. Sometimes we can see certain things and maybe explain it away without doing the due diligence. Just to give a quick anecdotal, not so much abuse, but again, the kind of giving a justification before doing the inquiry. In the work environment that I had, there was a coworker, and that she was European, and she said everything at octave 11, everything, just how she spoke, and I was surprised that all of the other Euro coworkers were just very accepting and tolerant of it. And I guess just me having my own kind of jaded perspective, I was like, if I walked around being loud like that, I would be like the angry black woman. But I don't understand why it's just so okay for this particular European woman to just be so loud. So I went to my boss and I asked, why does she yell all the time? And so his answer to me was, she can't hear. It's because she has a hearing problem. So I said, well, if she has a hearing problem, then why don't you have to yell? If she's the one who can't hear, why do you always speak at such a regular, even tone? And how come she can hear the fax machine from all the way down the hallway if she's the one that can't hear? He says to me, I never thought of that. So I'm like, forget it. I'll just go ask her. So I asked her, I said, why are you so loud? She said, I'm one of 7 siblings, and I'm just used to having to talk louder than everyone else. So she didn't realize that she was being so loud. But because she grew up having to talk above a lot of, very loud, she comes from an Italian household, so everybody's very, aggressive and whatever in their speech. And so she just grew up that way. Now, so I say that to say this, that our boss had just come up with an answer to something. He didn't associate it with her family, did not associate with her upbringing. He just assumed she couldn't hear because that was just a comfortable narrative, and that was the narrative of the workplace. Now, if there was something else going on with her, then no one would have thought about it. No one would have thought to interrogate it because a comfortable narrative was accepted. It was forwarded and accepted right away. And we see that happens. To go ahead and explore this other idea, we have leaders and the like that have things that are unacceptable happening in their household. In our community, we are whether we want to admit it or whether we really want to look at it or not, we are we tend to be very doctrine heavy. Like everyone has an idea about what the culture should look like, what the return should look like. And for the most part, there's a lot of biblical referencing more than really kind of biblical adhering. So the Torah actually says this. Instead, it's kind of like the gist of it is this, and so we create ideas around what we think the gist of the matter is. And unfortunately, and I don't know that this is the case in that particular household because we're not going to mention any names, but I do know that in my experience, in my 2.5 decades of experience in this particular community, there is a doctrine that apparently hasn't died out at all, that you can marry the woman and not have responsibility for the children that come with them. Very often in our communities, not just the Hebrew community, but the overall melanated and the like, the women tend to have physical custody of the children. And so when she creates a new family, the new man has now the task of accepting a package. And in the Hebrew, there's a particular strain of Hebrew thought, and I won't say that it's pervasive, and I won't say that it's everybody, but I know there's a strain of Hebrew thought that the man can take the woman, and the children should just go back to wherever they came from. And since for a particular strain of the Hebrew community, children come from the man. They have a relationship with the man that they don't have with the feminine principle. She's just kind of the incubator for the man's seed, but the child belongs to the man. So the child should just go back to wherever the child came from, and the husband or the new man, the new intimate partner, is only willing to take on the woman. So if you find a situation where there's a man that has that particular mindset and a woman who has not or would not send the child back or could not send the child to the father for whatever those reasons could be, then if you have a man who doesn't believe that he has any obligation to this child, who essentially is a fatherless child. The child, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have a biological origin, but that there is no one fathering. There's no one being parental in the masculine sense for this child. If the man doesn't feel like he has any obligation to this child, then that child will suffer in that home, because the man who's in the position or in the seat of a father has only signed up to be the husband, and that's a problem. And if that's the mindset, if that's the strain that some of our children are bucking up against, and the woman feels disempowered in this space because there's another strain that tells the woman she's lucky to have a dude, she needs to have the man. So now she has to choose between having the, quote, covering, close quote, in this man and then being a proper covering to the child she brought into the world. And we find this particular dilemma happening in our community also, which I would venture to state lends itself to some of this domestic abuse in the area of our children. With that, I yield.
You know, as you were talking, Sister Mayanah, I'm thinking that within the community, it comes from doctrine, but it also exists outside of the community, how you have a lot of blended families. And you have this thought of, so it's not even, it can't even be contained because it's something that happens across the board. Maybe the woman got pregnant when she was young, or maybe she got divorced, or whatever the case may be. And you have this blended family, and sometimes the stepfather or the step-parents, because it's not only fathers, it's mothers as well, feels as though that this child, I had to take you, but I don't really like the child. And so you have this kind of redheaded stepchild, this kind of story of the child being abused and not really feeling a part of this new space. Because even when you say the term step-parent, for some reason it doesn't necessarily come with a positive connotation. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, I didn't really come from you, and you're here. And, you know, all praise be to the Most High when a parent steps in who is not their biological child, and they love that child as their own. All praise be to the Most High. But you do have people who don't see the child as their own, don't accept the child, and I would agree with you. As you said, there's this quote, there's this thought of me or them, me or him, me or her. And the partner is trying to force a wedge between the parent, the biological parent of the child, and this new relationship. I mean, that's a whole nother story. But this is how, and if they're successful in this, then the child becomes the outsider. which makes it even worse because it's a child. So the child cannot defend themselves. They cannot provide for themselves. You know what I'm saying? And this is where the abuse is exasperated. It's a problem across the board. And if it's here, specifically, we need to continue to speak to it and bring awareness that this is not how it goes. Because if the person's child, the father is not there, then, or the father has passed, or whatever happens, the child is fatherless. And the Torah speaks about how you deal with the fatherless. You know what I mean? You don't get to abuse them, male or female. You know, these things come back. These are the things we have to be concerned with when we deal with those among us who are disempowered, who don't have power in and of themselves as of yet. It determines how we are as a people when we treat those among us that we feel can't do anything for us badly. That reflects to the Creator, like, oh, okay, that's what y'all doing now. You know what I'm saying? And so while we're praying and we're saying we're doing all of these things, it's important to realize how we treat one another, especially the children. We're going to go to, I believe Brother Salsa MariEL is here, so we're going to welcome him to the discussion. Press 1 again, MariEL. If you're on the line, press 1. Salsa, that you are here. Welcome to the conversation. For those who have just joined us, we're talking about a very important topic, so feel free to chair. We're talking about child abuse, signs, symptoms, and solutions. And we're kind of like jumping in between the signs, symptoms, and solutions as we're having this conversation and not necessarily dealing with one of them at a time. But what are some of the signs that you may see? What are some of the within a child that is within your daily movement or the child that you hear about? Do you have the right to go up and talk to the child? Because some parents don't want you to speak to, well, you spoke to my child. You know what I'm saying? Do you have the right to say, hey, how's everything going with you, such and such and such? Should you go to the parent? Should you go to the family? What should you do if you see something of this manner? We're going to go to MariEL at this point. Brother MariEL, the mic is yours.
Shalom, everyone. Sorry for my tardiness. I'm in the middle of working right now, but I just wanted to say shalom to everyone, and hopefully I'm able to join the conversation while I'm going to work as well. But I was paying attention to y'all to the segment, and it's very important that, or very vital that we make people aware of what childhood, child experience. So everybody here has been a child, so we should be able to tell the experience that we had, as children, and learn from our mistakes and learn from our parents' mistakes, and how to raise our children, bring our children up today, especially in this day and age, because this day and age is very, very crucial to our people, to just our community, and how we raise our children up in this society. So we have to be very mindful of how we raise them and make sure that, we try to, raise them up in the proper way that we possibly can, to make them better than us, better than our parents, because the whole idea of us as either having children or just any species period, no matter what species you go in the animal kingdom or anywhere, the whole idea is to make the children better than what we are. We should always be striving to make our children better and more, I would say, just more better in life and have a better life experience than we have. So I'm gonna say, go ahead and move on with that if y'all have anything else to add to that, and I'll come back in.
All right, thank you for that. That was the voice of Brother MariEL. He toned in. He did tell me he was on the JO. So thank you so much for listening in as well as sharing your thoughts. And I would agree, the whole purpose of the next generation is the saying that we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. And so if you beat the child down and not, resent the fact that they're standing on your shoulders, feel indifferent about the things that you didn't or weren't able to accomplish, and use that to project the child to lower them, then that kind of defeats the purpose. And I think in a lot of spaces, we don't really understand the blessing of children. When we look at the text, and I'm going to come to Sister Mayanah. Sister Tipharah stepped away for a minute. She says she will be back. When we look at the text, we see the desire for children when there isn't an ability to conceive. This wanting children, this understanding that children are going to help your legacy to live on. Hopefully you give them something. They're going to help your name to live on in the earth. You are going to be paying it forward. That's what children are. You're paying it forward. You're planting your seed, literally, and you are cultivating it and helping the soul, because that's what it is, to get to the next level that they need to get to. And so if you look in the 10 Commandments, the parent is the 5th commandment. Honor your mother and your father, that your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Most High your power give you. This is within the Decalogue, within the 10 Commandments, that this job of the parent is so important that it's commanded of the children to honor them. And when you have parents who are, for whatever reason, behave unhonorable or dishonorable better, then it makes it difficult. Some children struggle with, how do I honor this individual? How do I honor the person? How do I honor the people who the Creator allowed to bring me from the spiritual realm and manifest into the physical when they are causing me so much hurt or when they are causing me so much pain? That is a difficult space. And because it's a very touchy space and you're not supposed to shine light on your parents, that's also within the Torah, that certain sins, someone else has to put their hand on your father or your mother. But the child, because of, you see what I'm saying? So where is that line when this child may be experiencing abuse? And the thought is, if I speak out about it, it's dishonor. Because we're talking about now possibly solutions and signs that something is happening, but the child feels disempowered because they're against, or in their mind, they may be going against Torah if I say something. Sister Mayanah, what are your thoughts?
Can I be heard?
Okay, you can be heard.
All right. I put myself on mute. I wanted to just confirm. It's true that the child gets placed in a compromising situation when the child understands their own hurt and then is suddenly confronted with their own lack of agency or their own limitations. And so there's a crisis there for the child. We see this, or we've probably seen it, those of us that have studied it, maybe even on television or something, where the child will seek to protect the parent even to their own peril. And that's part of also the child's need to have, it's a type of survival because the parent is the only protector that they know. But that says something to us as adults, that if the child is going to place our well-being ahead of its own survival, then it should be a wake-up call to us of just how fragile that child is. We tell adults all the time, if you're in an abusive relationship, walk away. Right? But if you see a child saying, I don't have anywhere to go, this is it for me. So they protect the parent. They love the parent. If I love the parent more, maybe they'll stop. But if the parent, and in some cases, we have the parent that is looking for love also, and is saying, well, I need to, if I have to sacrifice, or maybe they feel like the relationship with the child is not in peril, and they do everything they can to preserve the marriage relationship, and that could be a desperation on either side of the male or the female. The reason I was going into the strain of doctrine before is because specifically in our community, doctrine, the Bible, the Torah, the other sacred texts, all of these are what we use for justification for behavior. Outside of our community, there's just the regular pathologies, all of the number of pathologies, the various issues that we have just in being human, in living this life, and having experiences and the like. There's always that. But when we come back into the Hebrew community, two things. One, we like to say that because we are the people of the Most High, there's nothing happening, right? There's nothing happening here. Or we try to keep an appearance or other people outside look in and say, well, because things are happening in your community, this invalidates your claim as a chosen people. So we get very guarded in these spaces. And some of this wrong-headed behavior is often they'll point to some type of doctrine, some strain of doctrine, some idea that references a biblical context but isn't necessarily biblical. And I think that's very, very important to be able to separate what someone is saying is implied by the text and being able to really look at the text and say, okay, that's not there. And there's this is definite push that says, and I say this not because I'm a man. I've seen it. I know personally families where the woman had to send away their child or children because the husband or the man would not enter into a relationship, no covenant with this woman, because according to this idea, the child could not be part of the package. That child belonged to another man. That the man felt like he could never fully or hypothesize, theorize that he would never be able to fully govern the child because the child belonged to someone else. And they find all kinds of ways to make this sound like it's super altruistic and concerned for the parental rights of the male or the whatever. But when in fact it really just boils down to, I want to be your husband, I don't want to be that child's father, or I don't know it happening in the reverse, and I don't believe that there's any strain of Israelite thinking that happens in the reverse, where the woman rejects the man's child. I'm not going to get into a relationship with you because Scripture says, but men have done this to women. And I would invite, because I know that this is, and I know this is still happening. I know for a fact this is still happening. And I'm saying I know that it happened in the 90s, over 20 years ago. This is 20 years ago, more than even before that. So the fact that we even find ways to, and this is a testament to people finding ways to be comfortable. Ways to skirt responsibility without saying I'm a bad guy, without being the bad guy in it. And I think that goes back to this idea of accountability and being held accountable, the community holding you accountable, and letting go of some of this really, really, really dangerous doctrine. And I was hoping, and I'm hoping, I keep repeating because I'm hoping someone will call in and say, well, this is why we have this. I know there's still people that are teaching this. I know there are people that are still applying this. And what I don't have any confidence is they're going to be emboldened to call in and tell me why they're doing it, why they're breaking up families, why they're mistreating or neglecting these other children, or why they don't think that's what they're doing. But you can't put anything past the people. Maybe someone will call in. Maybe somebody will put it in the comment section. But it needs to be discussed. It needs to be brought out. And then it needs to be done away with. This is very wrong thinking, very wrong-headed thinking.
All right. For those who just joined us, Mayanah said, my mind, again, this topic. Well, for those who just joined us, we're having a discussion on child abuse, signs, symptoms, and solutions. If you are out there and you would like to press 1, topics like this don't usually have the phone boards lit up, Sister Mayanah. It's not like somebody be like, yeah, I'm press 1 and tell you why I rolled up. You know what I mean? It's something where if people might be quietly listening and making excuses or wondering or just thinking and listening and processing what is being said. And like you said, I would love for someone to chime in and let us hear about some of these weird, strange little doctrines that are going on. Sal says there are no callers yet. And so I wanted to, we spoke about neglect. We spoke briefly about sexual abuse, which is another way in which children can be abused. Verbal abuse, name calling, yelling, screaming. Sometimes children do push you. And people will be saying, why the child is off the chain. Children are off the chain. They can be off the chain. And then some of the things that we think are off the chain are just children being children, right? And so how do we tell the difference? Because, again, and I wouldn't even just say it was economic, because you have a lot of children who may come from very affluent families still experience child abuse. And I think this particular issue is one that knows no bounds. What comes to my mind is that movie. I don't know if you remember that movie, Sister Mayanah. You remember that movie, Mommy Dearest? Is Mayanah still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I just was on mute. I remember the movie. I'm old.
You remember how wild, let's not tell them that. You know what I'm saying? They're like, Mommy Dearest, they're about to go on YouTube. But remember how wild the mother was? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
If you saw her in the street, you would think she was put together, this, that, and the third. But she had some serious things going on there. You know what I'm saying? There's no wire hanger. She starts spazzing out. The child is looking at her. Like, what in the world? So if you have, like, a high-strung parent, never mind if you have two high-strung parents. But if you have, so then you have no safe haven, right? Usually you have one high-strung and then you got a safe haven. But if you have two high-strung, may the most I be with you. But, you have this parent where the child is trying to learn you, right? The child, and I heard somebody say this before, it might have been a comedian, but, like, the child they have a master's degree in parents. They watch you. They see what you like, what you don't like. They stalk you. They be in the cut. You know what I'm saying? They're trying to predict your moods. They're trying to see when is the best time to ask you for whatever it is that they're looking for. You know what I'm saying? And when you're, like, unstable and unpredictable, it makes them, to a certain degree, and you said it earlier, unstable. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, yesterday you was hugging me, and today you're yelling and screaming and telling me to get out your face. And so when they have this level of uncertainty, or when they have the opposite, where the parent is just, we're talking emotional right now, just smothering them and everything they do. Oh, my goodness, little Johnny, that is excellent. And, everything little Johnny does is the best thing ever. Little Johnny goes outside not ready to face the world. Because you see what I'm saying? And that can develop into narcissism within little Johnny. Little Johnny could, think that it's okay for everybody to be at your beck and call and to serve you because you're royalty. You know what I mean? And so, again, as I was saying, if we just try to typecast abuse in, like, patchy hair, neglect type, if we just try to say it's that, then we might miss the other parts of where you might be hampering your child's growth. What do you think about the fact that abuse have two degrees or extremities that it can show up on the spectrum? What are your thoughts about that? Is Sister Mayanah still there?
Were you asking me, sis?
Yeah. Sister Tipharah, she stepped away. She should be back. And MariEL, he's there, but he's working, and the call is so quiet. I was asking, what are your thoughts on
the extremities?
Yeah, on the extremities of abuse. And when we think about abuse, do we only think about neglect, physical abuse, things that are like what we would perceive as really, really negative? Go ahead, Delaney.
Well, in my experience, when there's that kind of departure from what you expect something to look like, then it's very hard to approach. It's very hard to identify, because if, for example, you expect the abuser to be disheveled or constantly at the brink of losing everything, and what you have in front of you is someone that is methodical and calm and impeccable and smells great and looks great, then you're hesitant to believe any kind of counter-narrative to what you have imagined about this person. On the other hand, when you find someone that is maybe on the other end of that spectrum, and they're erratic and they're irrational and they're always very manic, then there is what we spoke about before, this lack of empathy. And so there's maybe a rush to over-punish and not take any time at all to figure out why the person is doing this and interrogate a little further, so that maybe there's room for help. And that the idea is not just, and in all these conversations, as a matter of fact, the idea is not just to identify all of the bad, but to eventually get to the space of solution. And so if the person is erratic and presents themselves in this very, immediate kind of dangerous situation, then maybe the idea is to separate instead of saying, well, let's go in and unpack some of this and see if we can get help for the parent so the parent can better parent the child, right, and then rescue the child in that way without taking the child out of when it's possible. I'm not saying that every situation is possible to keep a family together, but that's one of the dangers that I find when the abuser might find themselves on either side of the spectrum. Again, with the other side where the person looks very charismatic, very put together, then maybe he or she has too much of a following. The people around them are too invested in their constructed view, whatever this, if their fabricated view of the person, that they themselves are too invested to divest and say, well, now I have to go and seriously kind of look into this person, into their household, into their practices, because what that does is it interrupts, it disrupts, and unseats maybe some of the other things that they have tied to that person, especially if we're talking about someone who may be a leader or someone they themselves trusted with something. If this person is someone who's no longer trustworthy, or as you said before, is a dishonorable person, then that also has repercussions for them. And that happens when you see that there's somebody on either side of those spectrums. There's also a danger in expecting for someone to be in this binary space, because there are all those spaces in the middle. And like I said, with this kind of more neutral example that I gave earlier, our rush to make it make sense. And in our rush to make it make sense, we may kind of miss signals that we need to pick up on. And that's always to the detriment of the child, the detriment to the home. Again, just to bring it back full circle, what we're talking about is the family and the home and the dynamic of the family, which is the father, the mother, and the child or children. And we talk about domesticity and households and the like. And like we said before, very often we're only looking at the adults in the picture and forgetting how the children factor in. And like you said before, the children don't always have the language. They definitely don't always have the tools to not just express what's happening to them, but what they need to happen to them, what they need from us. They don't know how to express those things, not to their parents, and certainly not to outsiders. And this idea of not having proper attachment in the stage where it's necessary, it also feeds into these other kind of watershed issues of this fear of abandonment, which makes you accept things you wouldn't ordinarily accept out of fear of being, left behind. You become excessively clingy, maybe excessively accepting of bad behavior from other people. This sense of abandonment happens, and when we have a very real threat of abandonment in the way that we are understanding the family structure, that's a really big problem. And going back to whether or not the child was the child being wanted in the beginning, and we talked before about sex is marriage, sex being marriage and a particular ideology, but also the idea that sex is the privilege of marriage, that sex is the perquisite of marriage, that sex is the recreation and not the procreation part of being together. And when you make sex recreation or just recreation, and you forget that there's that procreative element to it, then you devalue what comes of this union. And we have a devaluing of our children. We're looking at our children as, I just need a bunch of children. Like, how many times do we hear that certain marriage strategies are pursued because there's this idea that the man has to have a trailer load of children. Oh, I need to have a lot of children. I'm doing this so I can have a bunch of children. One woman can only have X amount of children, but I can spit seed and populate. Okay, it's like, okay, but this population is not raising a child. It's not investing in the child. These are whole people and entire souls you are talking about. This is not, collecting and trading baseball cards, or back in the days we had those Garbage Pail Kid cards or Pokemon cards, whatever else people are trading and collecting excessively these days. Children are entire human beings. According to Scripture, these are the inheritance that the Most High has given us. Let alone what we're leaving behind. The Most High said, "This is your inheritance. I'm giving this to you. This is the inheritance you got from me. It's a reward from me." And so, are we treating our children that way? And if we're not, then are we pleasing? Are we doing what we're supposed to do according to Scripture? If Scripture is our foundation, if Scripture is our immune system, the thing that keeps us in check, the thing that keeps us healthy, if Torah is doing all of that, then I think it's time to have a health check.
Why'd you go there, Sister Mayanah? Oops. Brother MariEL is on the line.
Did I do bad things? Was I bad? Was I bad?
Go there? And I believe Brother MariEL has a little bit of time to speak to us. He's on break, so we're going to hear his thoughts on what I've heard thus far. And I think I want to pick up after that on something Sister Mayanah said. But Brother MariEL, the mic is yours.
All right, so it's a great conversation that y'all have. It's very vital to our community, because we have to remember that the children, is the future, of us. So we have to be very, mindful of how we raise them. Sis brought up excellent points about how we go about trying to raise them and look to them as our reward, because not everybody can have children. I know some people that just can't have children, and so they are the type of people who wish they could have children. They go out and love other people's children and stuff like that. While a lot of us will take advantage of us having children, because we think that they're our property and they belong to me, and kind of push them aside, but kind of use them when they feel it's necessary, or try to raise them up, and how and that's one thing. That's one point I want to touch on. Is how are we raising our children? Are we raising our children for them to be who what their potential to be, or what we see them as their potential to be? Because I have a sister, and she's real. She was very, very well talented in gymnastics. Growing up, from the age of 3, she's been doing gymnastics, and she did gymnastics for about, 18 years. But that wasn't her passion. That was my parents' passion for her to do that. And, as she got older, she kind of got pushed away from it, because they were so into it. So, all she got to do is she's going to make the Olympics. She's going to get college scholarships. And so they keep on pushing her. And that's a form of abuse as well. We have the other TV shows and stuff like that, I can't remember the names of the shows and stuff like that, but these moms are pushing their children so hard, and these are not what these children want to be. One girl, she wants to be a doctor, but her mom's pushing her into children's pageants or something like that. Or one girl, you have to allow your children to actually gain the personality, or allow them to find themselves before you start, on to do certain things. I understand if they're growing up to be kind of veer off or anything like that. But if you see a certain talent that your child has, or a certain passion that they have, or whatsoever, then allow them to develop that eagerness to actually go for it. For instance, I was telling you about my sister, and forgive the noise because I'm at a truck stop. But my sister, she was forced into gymnastics. Well, my daughter, they have the exact same skills. My daughter is she's all for it. That's all she wants to do. She's flipping everywhere. Every time she sees gymnastics on TV, she wants to do that. She wants to flip. She wants to, go on the bars and do flips around the bars and stuff like that. And so I'm seeing, okay, well, that's maybe something that she wants to do. But I've seen my dad and my mother, and no disrespect to my dad and my parents, because what they did, my sister.
I'm sorry, Brother MariEL, your phone is Brother MariEL, your phone is breaking up. It was clear in the beginning, but I'm not sure if you moved to an area, but it's breaking up a little bit.
Okay, how about now? I'm sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Can you talk again for me?
Oh.
Guys, it's breaking up. It sounds a little like sound line, like a little scuba diving kind of sound.
Can y'all hear me now?
I'm still doing the same thing. When you first started speaking, it was clear, and then...
Okay. Testing. Can y'all hear me now?
Oh, I was listening to what you... I'm breaking up as well? Okay, Mayanah says I'm breaking up as well, so I'm wondering if it's the Pow Talk. I'm wondering if it's Pow Talk.
Okay, I can hear y'all. I can hear y'all better now. Can y'all hear me now?
Yes,
I can hear everyone better now. Yeah,
okay,
everyone's
all
clear.
right, I had to go.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, but yeah, as I was saying, like my daughter, she's growing up, and she's, I see that these are her talents. She actually has a natural ability for gymnastics or whatsoever. But unlike my sister, she's actually has an eager for it. So I mean, and then seeing how my parents were kind of raising up my children. No disrespect to my parents, but my parents, they did an excellent job of trying to harness her talents or whatsoever. But I could see like the look on my sister's face, and in the sense that this is not what I wanted to do. I don't want to do this. I want to do something else. I'm tired of doing this, and I gotta do this every single day and stuff. Where my daughter, when I'm going to go to gymnastics, when I'm going to do gymnastics practice. So that could be a form of abuse as well to a child, is just trying to force them to do something that you wanted them to do instead of just allowing them to kind of develop eager for it or urge for it or whatsoever. So I mean, I kind of want to also get y'all thoughts on like, is it okay to kind of like, even though we see a talent in a child, or we see like a talent that, or very good talent that can get them far into places, should we push them along to do that, or should we just kind of wait for them to see what they actually like, or see what kind of, where they're eager to do in life or whatsoever? And I'm gonna fall back with that.
Thank you so much for that. I'm glad I heard you out to the end, because you bring up a very important part of this conversation about parents pushing their children beyond, living vicariously through them, forcing them in a direction that they may not necessarily want to go. Like, how far is, as they say, how far is too far? You know what I'm saying? Where is the line between being a parent or a guardian for that soul and allowing that soul to manifest and to grow and guiding it and helping it to get to where it needs to go, and now making you playing, the Most High. And they have these shows where you have I forgot what they call it, like the moms, and they want the child to go into, modeling, or they want the child to go in this, and they just run the child. You see this a lot with childhood actors, Hollywood actors. And unfortunately, a lot of the Hollywood children, they come to naught. Because the beginning years, if you look at a person as a tree, just follow me for a second, right? The Torah references the righteous will be as we're like trees, okay? And so if you look at the growth process of what it takes to actually, when you're bearing the fruit, to be able to have the deep enough roots, to be able to have the nourishment to support it. When we see a talent in a child, that's like the first bud coming forth on whatever it is you planted. And you get so excited that you want to begin to reap off of it soon. But what you do when you reap too soon is you deplete the tree. You see what I'm saying? Or you deplete that soul to where now that person doesn't find the pleasure in whatever it is they were forced into. Like, I have children. They're always with me. And I see the talents in each one. I agree with you, MariEL. I'm a person where I'm not going to force my will to that degree on my children. I'm going to see where they're naturally inclined at and begin to help it in a certain way, myself and my husband, but not force it. Because what I find is that the child will be overdeveloped in one area and underdeveloped in another. It doesn't matter how much talent you have. If you're rude and you're nasty and you're disrespectful, then those who were there to help you didn't do a good job. They exploited you. They took your talents and abilities, because when children get to certain levels, that's a boost for the parent. Oh, that's my child. You know what I'm saying? They did that. And so sometimes parents are pushing children in a certain direction for ego, for egotistical reasons, for bragging rights, for the child to get, to get out a jail-free card where they get us out the ghetto. We saw this displayed, and not necessarily most I rest his parents, but we see this displayed in the New Edition movie. This is how they depicted Bobby Brown's mother and his parents in the movie, but mostly his mother in the movie, where it's like he's going to get us out, of where we are. And some people look at the child as the meal ticket. You know what I'm saying? And as you said, if it goes too far, and that weight and the responsibility of the family or your hopes and your dreams that you put on hold because you had them, if you put all that on the back of the child, that may be emotional abuse. You know what I'm saying? That may be taking it too far. What are your thoughts, Sister Mayanah?
I would have to agree. I would definitely have to agree that when we project our desires, our failed ambitions, our aspirations, then absolutely on the child. And because the child is a clean slate, we the child hasn't gone through what I've gone through, and so the child is, all things are possible for the child, and it's an unfair burden to place on the child, especially if the child has no interest in going in that direction. What I would like to do is I would like to take the opportunity. I know that we're already coming to the 10 o'clock hour, and I'm not sure if there's any callers yet, but before that happens, I do want to take the opportunity to perhaps look at something that might be solution-minded in some of these spaces. The question was posed, what do we do? Maybe to curtail imposing certain things on the children. We just become very mindful of why are we encouraging, maybe stop to bethink ourselves, be very clear about maybe take some introspective and look at why we're doing what we're doing. And that could be in all of the spaces that we're discussing right now. Why am I feeling I don't have the confidence to defend my child in this space where one spouse wants to send away the child? Why don't I feel confident enough to protect the child in this space? Why do I feel as if I have to choose between the child and this space? So kind of stopping to bethink yourself and seek help. And one of the solutions is maybe seek help. Seek other people, have conversations. Sometimes we become too isolated. We're isolated in our congregation, so there's a kind of group think, and so we don't know that there is something more or something else that maybe we should be looking at. We get kind of caught up in those spaces. So if something doesn't feel right, if something doesn't make sense in all cylinders, interrogate it. We speak very, very often and highly about diligent inquiry. That's not just a catchphrase. That's not just, the trigger words. It's Torah. You have to go out and find out if something is true. That's wisdom. Protecting your family, figuring out whether or not you're doing something to the detriment of the family. If it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't look right, maybe it isn't right. Go and find out. If you test it, one or two things will happen. Either A, you'll find out you were right, or B, you'll find out you need to get more information. So go find these things out and seek help. Also, as a community, if we see that something is to the detriment of a child or another member of a family, then we have to consider that we're all part of this grander family's dynamic and look out for each other. It's not my business mentality that we got just out of survival, and that was a survival mechanism. We just couldn't. All the time when we have people who are constantly going through pain, it's hard to take on the pain of other people. So sometimes just to protect oneself, we become kind of introverted and say, that's not my problem. I can't help them anyway. And you turn a blind eye, but then all of these things are happening. And we have to remember that we have an interconnection and an interconnectivity and a collectivity. We come from a collectivistic society. Our culture is collectivistic. Even though the one that we have adopted in modernity is always emphasizing this individualistic ideas. That's not where we come from. That's not our culture. That's not how Torah works. And that's what happens. Torah needs a collectivistic mindset in order to work. You know, like when you have a device and you try to use the wrong adapter, it's not going to work. You can't plug something into the device that doesn't belong there. We can't put Torah in an individualistic mindset and expect it to work. I'm on record for saying very often I get people asking for Torah solutions to non-Torah problems. You don't have a Torah problem. I don't have a Torah solution for you. So when you're talking about we're looking to do something and we're trying to make Torah be the reason, if we're not putting Torah in the context that Torah came from, it's not going to work. So we can't have the it's not my problem attitude when Torah needs it to be your problem. Torah tells us to check on our neighbors. Torah tells us to if the child, like for example, we have I don't remember where, I'm pretty sure if I check a note or something, but in our scriptures, it tells us, like for example, you see a family that's struggling with a wayward son, that the mother and the father take the child out to be publicly disciplined. They take the child out and they say, listen, my child is a glutton and a drunkard and doesn't listen to me. And the elders and the public stone the child. That wasn't, well, that's your problem, that's your business, you should have handled your child. It's in Deuteronomy. I knew it was Torah. It's Deuteronomy 21. Deuteronomy 21:18 through 21. So this idea that it doesn't matter, and Tipharah spoke earlier when she goes back and kind of does some self-reflection, that she laments that when she saw a child that her heart was hurting for, that she didn't have the courage to stand up for that child. She didn't have the courage to speak out for that child, and it hurts her now. She said to us just now on the air that she regrets that moment. We don't want to have moments of regret like that, and Torah prevents us from having those moments. Torah tells us don't be so in love with our leaders that we can't tell them that this is wrong, or we're so invested in the image that we can't take a moment and have some distance and say this is a mirage. It's not real. I've created something that makes me comfortable, and you know what? The fact is, we're going to have to get uncomfortable. And it's better, you know. And if we're saying that we're too scared to do it as adults, can we conceptualize what the child is going through? If the adults are too afraid to protect the children, what does that say about our children? What does that say about the state of our homes, of our domiciles, of our domestic front? Before we worry about all these foreign invasions, we have a domestic situation. We have problems at home. And if we're not protecting our children, what other relationships are we trying to protect? Here on the Relationship Challenge, my people. That I yield.
All right. To my understanding, we have to the 10:30 mark. We didn't get cut off yet, so because overtime been tripping. But thank you for that, Sister Mayanah. If you have anything to say, feel free to call in. I was just scrolling as you was talking, Mayanah, and I came across a post, and just in the spirit of what we're talking about, and getting some testimonies and some, feeling the temperature of the crowd. I think it's relevant to what has been just said, and I actually just happened upon it. Okay, it says, my cousin was raped by her stepfather when she was 13. She committed suicide after her mom told the whole family she was lying and trying to, quote, destroy her marriage, end quote. My aunt is still married to that man. Okay? And if that confession or sharing wasn't alarming enough, some of the comments were. Same thing we're talking about here. A 13-year-old is still a child. The mother apparently is on the side. And we're just going to say hypothetically because we weren't there. But the story was put out there. The mother is on the side. It's a stepfather, so apparently the stepfather has to, who are you going to choose? The mother chooses the marriage. And now the daughter, apparently of another marriage or another relationship, is the outsider. And the end result of that is the child taking their own life. As we were speaking about before, the individual feels they have nowhere to go. They don't have the tools to cope. And so this is one of the results of some of the stuff that's happening. What was even alarming was some of the defense of children lying, how could you believe her, all of this stuff. But a woman presented this, and then I'll ask your thoughts. Why will so-called black women do anything to stay married? ? It's like we value being a wife over being mothers and protectors of our children. Then wonder why we have crappy relationships with our children and they don't trust us. This was very upsetting. And if that is not like right up the alley of this discussion, I don't know what is. Sister Mayanah, since you're the only one left here standing who would like to continue this discussion, what are your thoughts on what you just heard? Go ahead.
I think that the first thing that I would say is that there is no one answer to that. But if I were to interrogate the pathology, I would say this. Historically, what melanated women have been successful at doing is giving birth to children. What they are not on record as being historically successful at being is wives. And so there is it's not a goal as much to be a mother. That space may not need the same kind of protecting as the coveted role of being the protected space of wifehood. We've had husbands taken from us. We've had whole ideologies that say, that the man can or has been shared in all of these different spaces. So being claimed, being the wife, is a coveted role. Also, if you look, particularly in this society, from our historical perspectives, we've always got to see the European woman in the space of wife, and that wife, that the way the man deals vis-a-vis that wifehood, it looks very. With the way the European man protects his woman, she gets to be feminine. She gets to be a protected space. So in some cases, she didn't have to work. She didn't have to do all these things. Of course, the European woman resented all of those things and felt suffocated by those things. But the melanated woman who was a wife, but, and don't forget, I don't want to underplay the fact, and I don't want to even misrepresent the fact that melanated women have been married, that we do get married. But the narrative isn't that way. We still hear all the time that the population of women that are unmarriageable is a melanated woman. So if you have it right now, like in contemporary spaces where women are being consistently told that they're unmarriageable, then having a man say, "I'll wife you," is like, you get the skies open up, the beams of the sunlight, wash over you, and hallelujah, right? Somebody wants you. But getting pregnant, you can do that. Being a mother gets done. A lot of women, you're getting from the moment that we have 13-year-olds who can accomplish being mothers, but not too many melanated women are accomplishing being legitimate wives. So you may have that, or keeping a relationship. This idea of always competing over, not even marriage even, but having a man at all. And then if you, again, if I go into the context and bring us right back to Israel, we have entire doctrines, entire bold doctrines that tell you that you can't even pray unless you have, like the man has to pray for you. You need a man for everything in Israel. Everything. In many parts, I'm not going to say that again. It's wrong to say that all of Israel is a particular way, but it's a very pervasive kind of opinion that even, for example, even in spaces where a woman might be teaching something, the question is, who's your husband? Where's your husband? Where's the proximity to penis exactly? Are you? So there's always this idea. I think there was a sister who posted earlier in this week, or maybe even earlier today, that the same counsel that a man might receive from his woman gets rejected, but received if it's received by the man. So the man plays a totally different role in Israel. So women start to connect their ability and their identity to their proximity to the man. and there's doctrine that would if you adhere to it, that would support this idea that you need to have a man. Women start, and it's not just in Israel, and it's again not just with melanated women, but women have been pretty much told that what completes the feminine identity is this man. So there's this kind of walking around feeling incomplete, whether in this community or any other community outside of the community or the melanated community proper or mainstream, anywhere. This idea that the feminine does not get complete until she becomes joined with the masculine. And I think that we may have had this discussion in other spaces, but other cultures have it the other way around. Like you don't really get to come into full manhood until you become married. But here, there has been an emphasis on the woman doesn't have any kind of complete identity unless there's a man. Remember, we talked, I don't even know if it was under the palm or the relationship challenge or maybe even our private communications, but we talked about there being even a space where early in American history that women didn't have an identity at all in terms of a legal identity. That she was legally not a person unless she was married. And when she was married to that person, if she was married, she was legally not a person. Her husband was the entire identity. So she could never be left exempted. She could never be convicted of a crime or held accountable for a crime because legally she didn't exist. Legally she wasn't a person. She was she was under the auspice of the husband. So this kind of idea of needing to be associated with the man is tied to so many social expectations. It's tied to so many social identity kind of norms and politics, I guess you would call this another type of identity politics. But women have never really in this country been able to be fully recognized as fully human without being associated with the man. I mean, just again, if we look at early church ideology or early philosophy, the idea was the woman was an incomplete or deformed man. So the only true human, the only one that's truly human or truly full has been the man, and you are always someone that needs to be added to in order to be complete. And like I said, there's so many things that kind of works into the psychology of the woman feeling like she needs to be associated with the man. There's also the idea of escaping the angry black woman or the independent black woman trope. You can escape that if you can say, look, here's my husband. But if you're the single woman, then what's wrong with you? There's this idea something's wrong with you if you're not with the man. What happened? Why doesn't any man want you? Even in conversation, somebody will say, well, that's why you don't have a man. What is so it's like having the man is the ultimate objective. There's just so many, again, moving parts to why that becomes the goal and why that becomes a protected goal for women.
And thank you for that. And as you're saying, possibly why the woman would choose the man over that which has come from her own body. Like why that need for or social pressure to identify with the man will allow the woman in her mind and space, and not all women, but some, to sacrifice the child so that she can keep the man. It reminded me, and I couldn't even stomach the whole movie. I never honestly watched the whole movie. I'm not really a movie watcher, but that movie Precious, if we want to talk about a depiction of child abuse, child exploitation, I feel deeply when I even watch movies, so I'm careful of what I watch. And I knew it was a movie, Sister Mayanah, but I couldn't watch it. The way she spoke to it did something to the very core of who I was like, yo, son, I want to come through the screen. The way she spoke to the young girl, you know what I mean? I'm like, this is not acting. You know what I'm saying? Where is that venom? Where is that? It has to come somewhere, even when you're acting. You know what I'm saying? Where is that coming from? And even if it was on the screen, how did you go through that? I mean, I think I got like a few, not even a quarter through the thing, and I'm like, I can't do it because this is This is terrible. But the truth be told, that is how some people really speak to their children, to their culture. They speak to the little ones. You better, especially when I was in the city, and you see young mothers or even mothers who are tired or too much stress, and they're talking to the child like it's a grown individual. Like, you better, I'm going to tell you. I'm like, whoa, you look around, and it's a 2-year-old with snot coming down their nose.
Right.
And you're like, lady, you know what I mean? I need you to take a chill pill. Like, what are you doing? And so that child goes to school, and that child has siblings, and that child mimics that behavior. And that child then sometimes begins to abuse other children because monkey see, monkey do. You're going to go out and now say, this is the way I get what I want. And when you look around, you say, this behavior is coming from somebody. And 9 times out of 10, you can see that it's coming from someone in the household. So this is how child abuse goes from child abuse to peer abuse, where you're bullying in school, where you're doing all of these things, to adulthood. So this is why this conversation, if you have 6.6 million children being reported for abuse, understand that those children, one day, those who survive, will grow up. They will be your potential neighbor. They will be your potential coworker. They will be your potential mate. And so if you do something about it and help save a child, help give the tools, help intercede on someone's behalf, then you can help someone's future. Because when you, again, like they said, they usually grow up to be involved with somebody abusive or somebody who's going to make them feel what the parents or the home setting made them feel. And I wanted to say this, and I would be remiss if I didn't, that some children are not abused by their parents or by those in the home. Some children become abused when they do get into the system. You see what I'm saying? When they go into the system, and then within the system there are so many cracks. There are so many things that can happen to the child. They're in group homes. They're in this. Some children experience the abuse there. And so we have to say that this child abuse does not only take place in homes where parents or people cannot govern themselves enough that they can help to govern others. It takes place in places where they're supposed to feel safe, where they were taken so that they would be protected, and in turn they were also exploited. You know, a lot of sexual abuse happens in this space, sometimes physical abuse, and the child is even more lonelier. And they wait to, what do they call it? What do they call it when they get age? There was a slang. I was watching a documentary, but when they come of age, it's like either opt out or whatever it is, that they wait for their time to just be able to get flushed out of the system. So there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of moving parts. It's not just one way. Hopefully this conversation, because we're coming to the 10:30, and I don't want Blog Talk to be like, thank you for calling. So, thank you for using Blog Talk. Goodbye. But just so that we can kind of broaden the scope. Hopefully we were able to achieve that. Do you think we were able to achieve that this evening, Sister Mayanah?
Prayerfully, at least we were able to get people thinking. I never believe that in our little time on the air that we really come up with sustainable solutions in every conversation, but definitely we provoke thought and maybe embolden someone to shine a light in their little corner of the world or their little corner of the community. Remember, like the 1980s show that we watched together, and the sister who was I forget her name now, but she said, I don't know about saving.
The documentary that we showed on Facebook. That documentary.
Right. You know what I'm talking about. The sister, what she said.
They said a lot.
The one sister, when she said, "What can we do? What's the solution? How do we save the community?" And the sister was like, "I don't know about the whole community, but I know that I can change what's happening in my house and on my block and on my street with my people. And if everybody checked what was happening in their house, on their block, on their street, then we will just by virtue of the work get the whole community covered, right?" And so sometimes we look at the situation and say, the situation is so big, like how can I save everybody? And, maybe you can't, but you can do your house, your corner of the world, your street, your block, your peoples. And
your house.
And you're right, your house. And the thing about it is, like, we're trying to impart to the people is that you're not as isolated as you think. And this idea of you being just one person is what's disempowering and deactivating your role. Understand, you never know who you touch. How many times have we watched those movies where it's like the butterfly effect or pay it forward? Like you did something you thought wasn't effective in any way, but then that person went and touched some other person and it touched some other person. The ripple effect is so real. And that's why I say that you have to have a Torah mindset for this to work, because in Torah, all of us were connected. Everything we did was connected. We have 10 commandments. Only 4 of them directly tell us how to deal with the Creator. The other 6 is you can't the reason why we need 6 against the 4 is that we can't do the 4. We can't truly love the Creator if you don't love each other. The Most High said, understand this first. The Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, is our covenant vows to the Creator. Like, it's literally what we vow in our marriage covenant to the Creator. And 6 of those is he said, you know what? Love each other. Love each other. Don't do these things to each other, and don't do those things to each other. And that's how you love me. And what is it, Malachi or Micah, when the Most High told them that we did wrong by him, and say, how did we do wrong by him? He was like, every time you did these other offenses to these other people, that's when you did wrong by me. It's in Malachi, right?
In Malachi, yeah.
It's in Malachi and Micah. And so we forget those things because we have been so accustomed to this individualistic mindset, but Torah is collectivistic. We cared about how other children were being raised because we married our children to the other children in our communities. We knew who the other people were. That was important. We think about, the men goes out and the men are going out and just selecting women, and that's not even really how the culture worked. We had children were betrothed from babyhood because parents were making those decisions and watching you. It mattered what my neighbor's son was doing because he was going to grow up to be my daughter's husband. That's why I cared. That's why it mattered. Yeah, and we don't have that mindset anymore. We're so busy, you make your own decisions, and we're so, it's all about being independent and my personal rights and the blah, 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 and we're not invested in each other anymore, or we're invested in the wrong ways and protecting the wrong things.
I would call it positive peer pressure. Usually they peer pressure and they say it's negative, right?
Right.
But positive peer pressure, when you're in a community, and we have Brother MariEL back, and we're going to wind down now, but when you're in a community and people are around, it puts a different level of pressure on you than when you walk outside and, no one knows who you are and you know who no one is. So there's no level of expectation. So if you live in a space, like I live in a space now where if you don't cut your lawn, right, and this is just a simple thing, right, but I'm noticing it, like if you don't cut your lawn and everybody else around you got their lawn cut, you start looking like the unruly person, you see what I'm saying? Who didn't cut their lawn today. And it's in a positive way, right? And so you're like, I'll get it tomorrow. I'll get it the next day. And then weeds start blowing. I'm like, okay. You know what I mean? Dude done cut his lawn too. And so that's the positivity, as opposed to if you was in the bush and there's nobody around and there's no reflection of yourself. Because when you see someone else's lawn is cut, it's really a reflection of you start to think about your lawn. So when you see somebody who's upright in Torah, it's supposed to be a reflection to be like, oh, wow, do I have my ZC on? Oh, wow.
Right.
Did I make sure I say my tefillah? Oh, wow. Did I? You know what I'm saying? But you have no reflection. There's nothing. Your brother or your sister is not reflecting back to you that which you're supposed to be doing. And because that element is missing, it makes for us to have this kind of vigilante mindset. You know what I mean? We just riding out, doing whatever it is that we want to do. And then when we come into contact with one another, because it's not a daily thing, we feel judged. You know what I mean? Like, we begin to look for, it's a different feeling. It's not like I feel empowered to go make sure I'm doing right. It's like, well, why are you talking about me? You know what I mean? Well, such and such, and it becomes a negative thing. And so I think that's a whole nother conversation. It's a good one, Sister Mayanah, but I think it opens up a whole nother discussion about where we are realistically and why some of these things are not working. Some things only work when it's in the space for it to work. You know what I'm saying? When all of the other elements are there, then you see it working. If not, then we're just kind of trying to take it, look at it, dissect it, and hypothesize what it should look like. But when you're actually in it and actually doing it, it becomes something totally different. And a lot of us don't like critique. We don't like reproof. This is all part of loving your neighbor. Most I say reproof. You know what I'm saying? Don't be a talebearer. We don't like these things. You know what I mean? It doesn't make us feel warm and fuzzy. And when you see a distant relative, you're not supposed to talk about anything except for, wow, I haven't seen you in so long. You know what I mean? You're not around enough to start telling me my business. And so that's kind of the issue that we have as a returning people, this kind of disconnect. But before we get cut off, for those who have just joined us and will be listening on the replay, this is a discussion about child abuse, child neglect, signs, symptoms, and solutions. We have Brother MariEL to give us his closing thoughts on the matter. Brother MariEL, the mic is yours. I'm not sure. If he told me he was back, but I'm not sure. I know he's still on the road and moving.
Hey, MariEL.
Is he back?
MariEL, you're on air, MariEL. Okay, sorry, I was on mute. I was on mute. But yeah, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So I was saying that I enjoyed the show. Sorry I wasn't able to participate as much, but I was able to participate when I got to. But there's a few for my closing thoughts. I'm looking like a few points of what I would have spoke about. Trying to make it quick. When we have children or whatsoever, we have to make sure that we don't. We have to be mindful. Like this is saying, like they're more than just our property or just people who we created and. They're people, so they're people with feelings. They're actual human beings that have feelings, and stuff. So when we are raising them, we have to raise them we have to treat them the same like we treat everybody else as well. When they get to a certain age, you got to be able to still have that open up communication where they can come to you about anything. I know it's a lot of people. Got a lot of people who grow up and they don't have a relationship with their parents because of the fact that, how their parents raised them and they raised them so strict that, they can't really tell them anything or they can't, express their feelings or true emotions because, their parents will kind of brush them off or, say, like, I can't remember who was saying this, but like, they're like, oh, just man up or just grow up or, just take it. They have emotions too, just like we all have emotions. We can't be the one that, as adults having emotions, but then when our children have emotions, we undermine it, and also as well as, as being parents. And if you're not having a good relationship with with your significant other or their mother or father or anything like that, don't try to use your children to get back at them. I have, I know several people who grew up and their parents was fighting using them. I'm gonna take your son away from you. I'm gonna take your daughter away from you, and then now they are in a situation where they have to choose. Okay, whether I need to go with mother or I need to go with my father or something like that. And then you're finding yourself in a situation, especially with mothers, where they. We're in a society where the mothers, 9 times out of 10, gain custody of the children or whoever, and we use that against their fathers. And you have to remember that the children will grow up and one day realize what's going on, and then you'll wake up one day and being like, your children are resenting you because they find out, oh, you held me from my father, you held me from my mother. So we have to, be mindful that, we don't use our children as weapons. We raise our children, be good co-parents. If you're in a situation like that, you don't have to be with that children's father, or you don't have to be married, to be a good parent. You can be a good parent just by simply just being in your child's life. I learned a lot from just seeing, how people are growing up and seeing how people, treat their children and stuff. And, I take it upon myself now that, I want to be in my daughter or in my son's life, or whoever comes after them because, they need us. At the end of the day, they need us. The Most High put, make us, we are their first teachers than anything. So we have to be mindful of what we're teaching them, what we're showing them, what type of experience we allow them to have. And I know a lot of people might disagree with it, but be a child's friend. I'm not saying that, you take them out to the club and let them do whatever you want to do, stuff like that, but, still have a relationship with your child where they can come to you about anything because, the children are growing up and now they're going after their peers to seek advice. And sometimes their peers don't give out the best advice, So, you have to open up a line of communication where they have that feeling where they can come to my mom for anything, or I can come to my dad for anything. I can talk about anything with them, and people be like, anything with them, and you can't be so judgmental towards your children. You have to kind of know that you was at that state at one point, know where you came from, because we was all children at one point. So you have to know where you came from and raise them, show them where they trust you enough, and when you tell them something, okay, you shouldn't do that, or don't do that, then they won't think, oh, well, my mom don't want me to do that because she don't want me to have any fun, or my dad won't let me do that because, he's being strict. No, I'm telling you this because, for your, so you won't make the same mistakes that I did, because, at the end of the day, Dad says, honor your father and your mother. Do you have to like your father and your mother? There's some cases you don't. But at the same time, a way to honor them as well is to not make the same mistakes they have. Because when it says honor your father and your mother, at the same time, you're honoring their family. You're honoring your family's name. You're honoring your family's heritage. So you don't want to you don't want to raise up a child where they go out into the street and people are like, oh, that's so-and-so's parents, or that's so-and-so's, that's so-and-so's child. Look how they are. What's going on? Because when they look at your child and they see that they're being bad, they're going to look at you. So they're going to be like, how are you raising your child? I don't like that child. I don't like this man. That could be your neighbor. That could be your wife, your co-worker, your husband. That could be somebody who you get caught up in. And if they had a bad childhood, yeah, it's going to veer off into their adulthood. So we need to be mindful about that and pray and pray with your child. Teach your child how to pray. Teach your child about, the Most High and, what he expects out of you when they grow up. So that's all I want to say. Again, thank you for at least allowing me to come on for the few minutes that I had and able to share my thoughts a little bit. And, shalom, family, and shalom, Nashim. And hopefully I will be able to have more time on the next discussion. But till then, everybody be peace. Everybody be peace and prosperity. Shalom.
Thank you so much. Shalom to you, brother. Thank you for taking the time to come in, let your voice be heard. Your points were on point, so we're going to leave it at that. We're at the 10:30 mark. We're going to close this session. Hopefully you heard something that will resonate with you, that you will be able to share and implement and think and contemplate on. So all praise be to the Most High. Thank everybody for joining us, and see you next time.